having our council meeting at 6 o'clock here on February 2nd in City Hall. We're having a workshop tonight. So if you would all please stand. Pledge allegiance, please. Ms. Raymond, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Mayor Hogue,
Here.
Councilmember Kellum, here. Councilmember Morrison,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Raymond, here.
We're going to move into public participation. Anybody would like to speak on anything that's not on this agenda? Daniel, do you have anybody raise hands?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay, we will close public participation and go into our meeting. We are discussing our sustainability for the city of Cape Canaveral. And Zachary, you're going to take it. You have the floor, sir.
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Good evening.
Good to be here finally and be in person again. Hey, what? So yeah, today we're going to be talking about our 2021 City of Cape Canaveral Resiliency Action Plan via this workshop. And before we get into that, I wanted to quickly introduce our newest temporary staff member, our intern. Her name is Tracy Alt, and I'll let her speak in one moment, but she's going to be helping the city conduct its first greenhouse gas inventory, along with several other cities, a lot of them in this county. And Brevard County itself, I believe, will also be doing this initiative where we'll basically be tracking our emissions, municipal operations. And with that, I'll let her introduce herself and we could tell you about who she is.
Hello, my name is Tracy Alt. I'm a student over at the University of Central Florida. I'm currently majoring in environmental studies with a minor in geosciences. And over the next couple of months, we're going to be taking a look at some of the data from heat, utility, waste, and wastewater. And we're going to take that and input it into the complete clear path inventory tool. And from there, we will assess the greenhouse gas emissions as it currently stand. And hopefully, we hope to find that we can find ways to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in the future.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. And her work will play directly into what we'll be talking about tonight. So, Brenda, do you want to be late for a sec?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? All right. I'm going to start us off. Daniel, if you'd go ahead to the next slide, please. So this is a general overview of the contents of our workshop. I'm going to ask, I know you guys probably have a lot of questions or maybe some comments. I'm going to ask that you guys let us get through the presentation and then save those for the end. You'll have time to make some comments and we'll figure out the next steps from there. But this is a general contents of the action plan that you guys have been given. But before we get into that, I'm going to take a step back and talk about how we got here. Next slide. So I hope most of you now have seen the vulnerability assessment that we did a couple years ago now. That was done via the Regional Planning Council through a grant that we got through FDEP. And what it did was it looked at the city and it assessed everything that makes us vulnerable, from sea level rise to potential power outages, economic assessments. They looked at demographic information, all of the things that make us a city, very important. When we did the assessment, we did two public components. We did two public workshops. What came of those was a number of things that the residents said were important to them. And so from that, we built the action plan, which Zach will get into a little more detail. But I want to touch on something for the vulnerability assessment and why it's important. There is a provision from the state also called peril of flood. And what this says that because we are a barrier island, a coastal municipality, that we have to do certain things in order to show our readiness to be able to adapt and to make our infrastructure resilient to some of the challenges that we're going to face in the future. So one of the things that says is that, we have to think about ways to either eliminate we have to think about principles that either eliminate or transition us away from unsafe or unsustainable development. So through the vulnerability assessment, we got a lot of data and told us where the areas we needed to focus on. And from that, we've built, like I said, the action plan. Next slide, please. So the vulnerability assessment in a nutshell told us that we are going to be looking at sea level rise between around 5 and 8 feet by 2100. Now, we're already feeling some of that in this current climate. When we have some rainy day events, sometimes you guys might notice that the streets might not drain as fast as you'd like them to. Or if we just have a really, bad rainstorm that's not necessarily a hurricane, you might feel some sustained winds or something like that. So what we're trying to do is work to strengthen our infrastructure and give you guys kind of a holistic approach on how we get there. The action plan is not intended to give you every policy step or decision. It's just supposed to give you a framework for the ideas and the things that we think will move us in the right direction. And one of the things, we're already working on a number of those things. One of the things is looking at renewable energy. Because we're Barrier Island, we are susceptible to outages. And we've worked with a lot of agencies, in particular FPL, to sort of see where we can move the needle there. So one of the things we've done is Solar Together, which is supposed to transition us to renewable energy. And then some of the smaller things we've done is, as a city's purchased, from this image you can see a solar generator. So that's all I've got right now. I'm going to throw it over to Zach. He's going to get into some of the details, and then I'll finish up with next steps.
Next slide, please, Daniel. Okay, so forgive me, I'll be reading from notes. There's a lot to talk about, but before moving forward, I wanted to again briefly summarize some of the assessment's conclusions and recommendations that played a direct role in formulating the action plan you see before you. So, as Brenda said, the city of Cape Canaveral, according to the vulnerability assessment, can expect anywhere from 5.15 to 8.48 feet of sea level rise by 2100. However, significant and sustained impacts from sea level rise could begin as early as the 2030s in the form of sunny day flooding, stormwater backups, and inundation of some of the city's lower lying areas, including along State Road A1A, especially in the city's northwest corridor. The city will continue to have an increasingly older population. Immediate work should begin to harden infrastructure and expand resiliency efforts. The city should increase on-site renewable energy usage for power assurance and continuity of operations. The city should utilize forward-thinking, low-impact development practices in green infrastructure to improve stormwater capacity. The city should capitalize on the opportunities afforded by sustainable development and resilience planning, meaning to say that while all the challenges we'll be discussing soon may seem difficult and daunting, they should be viewed as opportunities, a chance to transform the city to a hyper-local based sustainable municipality that is safer, more secure, healthier, and ready to handle whatever may come our way. According to a report by the National Institute of Building Sciences, for every $1 spent on disaster mitigation projects, such as improving stormwater management systems and strengthening buildings against hurricanes, an average of $6 is saved on future relief costs. It's estimated that investment in sustainable low carbon technologies and measures that are cleaner and therefore healthier within cities could cut global urban emissions by 90% by 2050 and would have a net present value of almost $24 trillion, equivalent to nearly 1/3 of the global GDP in 2018. Next slide, Dan. So given the extensive scientific background and public comments provided through the development and completion of the city's vulnerability assessment, the document provides an excellent backbone from which to develop a resiliency action plan in order to turn its various recommendations into actionable targets to strive towards. And today, after over a year of work, we are finally able to proudly present a working draft of the city's 2021 Resiliency Action Plan to you, the first such document in the city's history. Next slide, please. Now, let's give some further context and supporting information as to why the city needs a resiliency action plan to help set the stage for what we could for what we and our residents can expect moving into the century. If we adopted our own, we would join a growing list of municipalities that are developing and implementing such plans due to many of the same reasons I'll touch on in a moment. A future-ready city is a city that is prepared to handle various shocks and stressors across a wide range of economic and climate-related events that use a sustainable, resilient, and forward-thinking infrastructure and policies. Resiliency in the context we're discussing today is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a region to plan, sustain, adapt, recover, improve, and grow collectively, regardless of what kind of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience, through specific actions and implementation strategies geared to address specific vulnerabilities. A common phrase you hear around the word resiliency is the ability to build back better. A future-ready city must balance economic growth, environmental well-being, and community equity in order to be prosperous, safe, and resilient. These are the three capitals that drive sustainable development. As we move further into the century, Florida, the nation, and indeed the world has seen more and more impactful events that showcase the imbalances of these three societal markers and the consequences of this imbalance. Brevard County and the city of Cape Canaveral are at a crossroads that now requires new forms of planning, adoption of 21st century smart infrastructure, and cleaner, independent forms of energy. I say we are at a crossroads because we are seeing an economic explosion across our area as a result of the emerging space-based economy through the commercialization of space travel, the growth of Port Canaveral, and a general economic enhancement of the county. And the city, given its location and quite literally being set in the middle of this, is set to become a hub of activity in industry and tourism. But on the other end of the spectrum, we are also set to deal with numerous natural hazards such as increased tropical cyclone activity and sea level rise that could have negative and long-lasting impacts on residents and businesses if we do not act now, impinging on this growth. We need a direction and a vision to navigate the crossroads. We need a plan. Next slide, please. So let's briefly discuss the challenges presented of the three capitals mentioned in the previous slide, but boiled down to the local level of the city that necessitate the formation of an action plan, economically, environmentally, socially. Here we'll start with some economic challenges. To briefly hit off some points, the city faces a general increasing residential population and an expanding number of visitor and tourist populations, increased industry, and more transportation in and around the city. Again, this is mainly due to the expanding of Port Canaveral, the commercialization of space travel, and a general uplift in economic activity. We are an economic gateway, or we are becoming an economic gateway into Central Florida. Next slide, please. A regional multimodal hub, as you can see in the graphic on the left side of the slide, which comes from the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. As you can see in the lower right graphic, Brevard's population is projected to continue to rise, nearing 1 million people by 2050. The projection comes from the University of Central Florida's College of Business Administration's Institute of Economic Competitiveness. That was enough. What impacts does this population increase have on our city and on our environment and our infrastructure? Next slide, please. The economic growth comes on the back of increasingly demanding environmental challenges, many of them our own doing. But in that fact is an opportunity to remedy these challenges and all the while guide the city towards a more hyperlocal, environmentally minded set of infrastructure. We are faced with a deteriorating Indian River Lagoon ecosystem highlighted in the Marine Resources Council's latest Indian River Lagoon report card, something we put out in the weekly update for residents to see late last year. The Indian River Lagoon occupies 40% of Florida's east coast, comprises 6 counties and 39 cities, generates $7.6 billion annually to Florida's economy. It is home to 1.6 million residents and is one of the most biologically diverse estuaries in the continental United States. Separately, a study released by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council and the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council in 2016 concluded that there is a 33-to-1 return on investment from a productive and sustainable Indian River Lagoon. In other words, for every dollar invested in the lagoon, there's $33 worth of economic benefits. We must do our part in maintaining and preserving this natural asset, the collapse of which would be devastating for the area and, of course, to the city. The city is also facing increased tropical cyclone activity, as made evident by the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. And tropical cyclone impacts are, of course, being made worse by sea level rise. We are seeing higher rainfall rates than in previous decades. Next slide, please. So 2020 was a stark reminder of the challenges we are facing, with a record number of billion-dollar weather and climate-related disasters being recorded by NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information at 22, which you can see here in this infographic. You can see how many of these were the result of tropical cyclone impacts along the Gulf Coast and eastern seaboard. Next slide, please. Together, these disasters resulted in $95 billion in damages, continuing an increasing trend of not only more disasters being observed, but higher associated damage cost totals. 2020 was the fourth highest ever recorded in terms of damage costs, the highest being observed in 2017, with $300 billion. You can see this increasing trend expressed in the chart at the top of the slide, with both the average cost and average number of billion-dollar weather disasters increasing over the last 3 decades. Following this trend, simply put, entails that the city has an increasing likelihood of being affected by one such disaster as we move into this decade and beyond. The reasons for this increasing trend, as stated by NOAA, is, I quote, due to a combination of increased exposure, vulnerability, and the fact that climate change is increasing the frequency of some types of extremes that lead to billion-dollar disasters. There has also been a 67% increase in major power outages from weather and climate-related events since the year 2000. And this is an important statistic, as I'll come back to in a moment. Next slide, please. Again, the 2020 hurricane season was unprecedented, and we as a city, while not entirely unaffected, were very lucky given what played out. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season was the most active on record, having 30 total named storms, 12 of which made landfall in the U.S., which is also a record. 5 of these cyclones either made landfall or had significant impacts in the state of Florida alone. The graphic from NOAA here and the National Weather Service represents the stunning scope of the hurricane season, with every single coastal area of the entire U.S. Gulf Coast and eastern seaboard being put under some type of tropical cyclone-related watch or warning at some point during the season. And a study published in June 2019 by federal scientists found that between 1944 and 2017, hurricane speed decreased by 17%, leading to more instances of stalling, basically meaning that hurricanes are getting slower, making prolonged impacts more likely. Next slide, please. So sea level rise, which is being observed across the globe by satellites, tide gauges, and visual markers, is also compounding the effects of these storms while making our storm surges higher than they normally would be. Tide data from Trident Pier in Port Canaveral clearly shows an increasing level in annual high tide events. The consequence of this is increased coastal flooding and inundation. As an example of this, we saw in last September when the city saw its highest non-tropical related storm surge event. Trident Pier's tide gauge saw a 2.69 foot rise in water at high tide, causing most of the city's beach to flood, and waves impacting the beach's sand dunes. One of these photos was actually taken by Councilmember Morrison. That night photo there. This was the 4th highest water rise recorded and Trident Pier behind Hurricane Irma in 2017, Hurricane Francis in 2004, and Hurricane Jeanne that same year. Next, please. Now, socially, the city faces an aging population that brings a whole host of other issues, one of which being safety. We know a number of our residents, thanks to our vulnerability assessment, are disabled, elderly, and do not have access to a vehicle for travel. Remember the statistic I gave about increasing instances of weather and climate-related power outages. Well, this is where this comes into play. Power outages, especially in the summer months, are potentially very dangerous to the elderly within only a relatively short period of time, heightening our need for more hardened and resilient infrastructure and services that can operate independently of the mainland. There are rising costs of living and goods, and there is a possibility of decreased access to basic needs, especially in a post-disaster situation, given our position as a barrier island. This position makes us already inherently more vulnerable, and the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly put such supply shortages front and center, showcasing the risk disasters pose, especially to our most vulnerable. Next slide, please. On this slide is a population pyramid for the city of Cape Canaveral, actually taken from the Resiliency Action Plan, clearly showing that the majority of the city's population is and will likely continue to be older, as denoted by the larger bars at the top of the pyramid within the 55 and over age range. Next slide, please. Okay, now we get to the plan. So now we'll take you through the plan in each of its sections, briefly summarizing them and stating what each section's purpose is within the document. This action plan is a living document. I want to stress that. It is not intended to remain stagnant in its policy directives and infrastructure plans. Like the world around us, it is designed to change and be changed as necessary, with built-in review periods by staff that are open to the public to ensure maximum efficiency, equity, and success. As stated before, this action plan will give staff the vision and direction they need to plot a course for sustainable and resilient development in the city for decades to come. The city is currently undertaking many sustainability and resilience-based initiatives, but we do not have a guiding document that sets deliverables and implementation periods. We do not have a document that makes clear the city's intentions involving sustainability and resilience and its commitment to them, at least not like this one. This is a document that will allow us to lead by example and showcase to the community at large why sustainability and resilience is the way to go, and it will allow the city to stand out among local, state, and national grant applicants, offering us greater chances to acquire funding and by displaying that by not only displaying our commitment, but also that we have shovel-ready projects in the pipeline ready for implementation. And just yesterday, Governor Ron DeSantis announced his proposed state budget for fiscal year 2021-2022. It stands at $96.6 billion, which, according to the governor, also addresses the challenges of sea level rise, intensified storm events, localized flooding by establishing the Resilient Florida program, which will provide $1 billion over 4 years to provide grants to state and local government entities. It is often the case that when cities adopt a plan such as this, there is a noticeable acceleration in progress. And I can speak to that from personal experience, to the fact that from the time when I was with the city of Satellite Beach as an intern. After adopting their own action plan, which I co-authored via an internship with the city, we were able to implement and scope half of the initiatives set forth in the plan within 18 months of adoption, including having a finished solar array atop City Hall. The core of Cape Canaveral's plan are 8 action categories, which include, in order, green economy, natural systems, transportation, energy, built environment, equity and quality of life, waste and consumption, and storm readiness and sea level rise. Within and spread across these 8 categories are 56 preparedness targets. The actual actionable items and goals we'll be striving to accomplish within the document based on the recommendations set forth by the vulnerability assessment and its public comments. Next slide, please. Now we'll do a brief section by section overview of the action plan. First in the document, we have the Cape Canaveral vision statement, of course. Then we have a message from the city to the community, a letter meant to speak to those both living now, here, and in the future. Then we have an executive summary that, of course, summarizes the document and its goals. Then we have next is a discussion about the city's demographics, highlighting some of the city's more vulnerable populations. The next 2 sections focus on the need for resilient and sustainable policies in much of the way we've already done here today. In the next section, from state to local, policies already driving change, we discuss some of the state and federally mandated policies that we must follow and comply with already, as Brenda spoke of, and how adopting this action plan will help us to continue to do so. The section after this discusses the city's vulnerability assessment, how it shaped the action plan. Then we have a section that summarizes some of the past and ongoing sustainability resilience-based initiatives the city has conducted. Next slide, please. The next couple of sections, we have the true deliverables of the plan, its 8 action categories and preparedness targets within them. We'll talk more about the preparedness targets in a moment. These 8 action categories are designed to encompass a broad range of socioeconomic and environmental topics that, addressed altogether, can allow us to fulfill our goals in making a more sustainable and resilient municipality. First in the list of 8 is green economy. This section discusses why it's important to promote and expand a green economy within the city, or one that is hyperlocal, diverse, and encourages environmental stewardship and utilizes while maintaining natural assets for ecotourism. Next is natural systems. This category will help the city take actions in the preservation and mitigation of its surrounding natural systems, both land and water, while also improving its resilience through the implementation of green infrastructure, like increased stormwater capacity, tree plantings, and living shorelines. Next is transportation. This category reviews the need for improved transportation infrastructure that is accessible, moves the city beyond purely car-based transportation to be more bikeable and walkable, and prepares the city for the continued adoption of alternative fuel vehicles, both around the community and for the city's own fleet. Next is energy. This category reviews the need for cleaner, homegrown renewable energy systems to provide power assurance, continuity of critical operations, lower utility costs, and reduced emissions. It sets targets for moving facilities towards renewable energy and providing residents with the means to do so as well. Next is the built environment. This category reviews the city's built environment, or anything really that is man-made, and discusses how to make it more resilient. This section is probably one of the more policy-driven sections, and would see staff updating codes in order to make the community more resilient against flooding, allowing for more stormwater capture and reducing the environmental burden of city facilities as a whole. Next is equity and quality of life. This category reviews equity and quality of life and calls for educational campaigns to empower residents in compliance with AARP's 8 domains of livability. It lays out the direction to develop a separate equity and community-driven social sustainability action plan to tackle subjects like affordable housing and food access. In the context of sustainability, the term equity has to do with fairness, whether all people have similar rights and opportunities, basic needs to maintain an acceptable quality of life. It is such a large topic that it really will require its own document, and that is just what is called for here. Next is waste and consumption, and specifically deals, as the title suggests, with reducing the amount of waste the city produces, and plots out active steps to accomplish this. The planet is suffering from a waste crisis. Solid waste pollution, mostly in the form of plastics, is overwhelming natural ecosystems and threatening to now even cause harm to humans as plastics make their way back up the food chain. Curbing our waste and utilizing long-lasting environmentally friendly alternatives is vital to reducing our impacts. And finally, we have storm readiness and sea level rise. This last action category reviews issues relating to tropical cyclones, flooding, and sea level rise, and plots out various mitigation steps and infrastructure hardening projects intended to reduce impacts, especially at critical city facilities such as the water reclamation facility that could reduce damage caused by hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Then we have a listing of all 56 preparedness targets and appendices. The 3 appendices include a listing of critical facilities compiled in the city's vulnerability assessment, references, and a glossary of frequently used terms. Next slide, please. So last but certainly not least, let's talk about the 56 preparedness targets outlined within the 8 categories. There is no reason there are for there being 56, that this just happened to be the number that there turned out to be. There can be more or less in the document, but we thought this was an appropriate and manageable number to begin with, as some are extensions of projects we are already undertaking, while others are entirely new. So, what is a preparedness target? It is an actionable, living target set within the plan to provide policy direction for staff and leadership for the community. They are categorized within 4 different implementation periods, which are current or ongoing, 5 years, 15 years, and 30 years. The reason these targets go out until mid-century or 2050 is because this is considered to be a safe buffer period between when the city can implement and accomplish meaningful mitigation strategies, mainly in regards to sea level rise, before the worst effects are realized, sometimes in the 2060s and onwards, according to the city's vulnerability assessment. It allows us ample time to make changes we need, allow for proper budgeting and proper scoping of projects, especially larger capital projects. Preparedness targets are to be assessed every 5 years via a staff review, essentially auditing the action plan, ensuring the targets we are striving to meet are actually being met, and how successful the implementation is. Plan updates will be made public, and there will be public comment period to seek community input. A status report will be developed to showcase where each preparedness target is in terms of implementation and/or success. This 5-year review is also an opportunity to remove or change preparedness targets as needed for whatever reason. Perhaps one has been successful and there's no longer a need for it, or one cannot be fiscally completed. Each preparedness target in the plan is broken down into 5 subsections. A target is stated, the purpose of the target is outlined, the implementation period is stated, a brief description of the target's implementation strategy is given, and a measure of success is stated that will assist with future reviews. I also want to make clear that really none of these 56 targets, as written in the plan currently, and explicitly call for regulations and/or banning of anything among residents and businesses. I do not believe in the city of Cape Canaveral that moving to put in place overbearing regulations or bans is the answer to see the change we want, especially when it comes to sustainability and resilience. Regulations and bans can be scary to individuals, and some may not be able to handle them economically speaking. The vast majority of targets only apply to city infrastructure, internal staff policy changes, and allow the city to lead by example for its residents, with us providing assistance educationally for whoever may want to follow our example. Some targets may also seem somewhat vague, and this is on purpose, as this allows wiggle room to work and scope out what we need based on real-world assessments that will eventually need to be conducted to implement some of the targets, which could cause them to change. Many of these targets actually serve to empower residents and businesses, allowing change to come organically through real-world examples set by us, which will hopefully result in natural community buy-in as we progress further along with the plan's initiatives. A great example of this and how much of the target should work is the city's annual sea oats planting. This is a city-led program that empowers residents to be a force for good through a sustainable and resilient initiative that now sees a massive community support and buy-in. People understand the need for sea oats. They wholeheartedly enjoy the event. It fosters great community outreach and provides a very tangible benefit to the entire city through its protection of the dune line. Now imagine this program, but extended to other things like tree planting programs, native plantings along the lagoon, solar initiatives, oyster gardening, enhanced recycling programs. If such buy-in and support can be extended across other sustainability fields such as these through our leadership and our actions, then imagine the possibility we can foster for good for residents both now and in the future. I also want to add that this plan is not the end-all. We are talking about topics here that are so vast and encompassing that some will undoubtedly need their own spin-off documents, policies, and even other plans. Take, for example, preparedness target number 22, which calls for the city's own vehicle fleet to be transitioned to alternative fuel vehicles by 2035. Well, we obviously don't have the space for this action plan, or within this plan, to plot out how we will do that. So over the 15 years that we have to do that, we will develop our own plan. And I have an example of one such spin-off document, which is a draft of an alternative fuel vehicle conversion plan for the fleet. So you can see how one spins off the others. This is a great example of not only the spin-off process, but also how this resiliency action plan will inform other areas of the city policy. It is a checks and balances system to keep us accountable, ensuring we are making good on our commitments of protecting our residents and the environment they live in. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about where we go from here with this process. There's no way we can obviously review the action plan page by page here tonight and go through any comments you may have line by line. We want you all to read through the document carefully if you haven't done so already. And if you have any comments, we ask that you please utilize the commenting sheet we provided for you. This sheet will make analyzing and implementing comments easier for us so that we may return the action plan for you to see next at the council retreat on March 31st. We ask that you read through the document and return any comments you may have to us by Friday, February 26th, about 3 weeks. This will give us time in turn to review those comments and make any changes necessary in time for a second reading at the retreat, where we hope to have a very nearly finalized document ready for implementation. We also would like to ask for your guidance on how to go about seeking public comments on the document. This is the first meeting the public has ever had a chance to learn about the document and see its contents. There are a few options on the table. Much in the way the vulnerability assessment was shown off to the public, we could have outreach sessions, or as I did in Satellite Beach, just as an example, we put the document online virtually and allowed a virtual comment period over the course of about a month, which worked out very well. So we're aiming to have an action plan finished through public comment, adopted no later than June of this year, so that we may begin the work of implementing its contents, as there is much to do and little time to waste. And before I stop talking, our action plan comes about as the county begins its own similar initiatives in the form of Resilient Brevard, which is an excellent development. We will hopefully align new projects and initiatives between ourselves and the county. The Brevard County Natural Resources Management Department has launched Resilient Brevard, a project to develop proactive strategies, policies, and a plan of action to increase resilience to the impacts of climate change. Sounds familiar. Resilient Brevard seeks to identify coastal vulnerabilities and provide local policy recommendations to minimize and mitigate the effects of flooding, storm surge, and sea level rise. The project launched by Brevard County and our friends, the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, is focused on 5 general areas: economic resilience, public services and safety, resilient development, public health and equity, and resilient nature-based practices. As I understand it, they had their first public comment workshop tonight, actually, same night as us. So with that, I don't have anything else to say. Brenda, do you want to add anything?
I will just add that another project that we are currently embarking on is reviewing our comprehensive plan. That's another one that we have been able to get funding through DEP, FDEP, and working with the Regional Planning Council. So that's just another example of us working on multiple initiatives and items that ultimately get us to be a more resilient community. But the comp plan will focus more on policy, and we'll have more discussion on that when the document is ready, but that won't be for some time now. So yeah, I think if you guys have one general takeaway, I think it's just an acknowledgement of some of the challenges that we're going to face, and just an understanding and a readiness to work with staff and then work with the community to move us forward. It's not going to be easy, but I think we can do it. And yeah, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, are you open for questions?
Sure.
Okay, Zach, as a city, as Cape Canaveral, compared to other cities in Brevard County, I mean, where do we stand? Are we at the forefront, or
Close.
I know Satellite is pretty active in resiliency in their plan. So we right there almost even with them, or?
We're close. I know of a few cities in the county that have already completed this process, one of which is Satellite Beach, as you mentioned. Another one is the City of Cocoa. They recently adopted a sustainability plan. And then I know the City of Palm Bay is working on one as well. As I stated before, a lot of them have now joined the greenhouse gas inventory too, through Tracy's internship, the Central Florida Regional Planning Council in Audubon, Florida. But I would like to think that our plan being pretty much, I would say 90% complete, is right there near the front. I think that's a good thing, because it shows our residents that we're looking out for the things that are coming our way,
Right.
and that we're taking steps to mitigate what's coming, and to protect them, and to make sure that this is a livable community for decades to come. I think it's sometimes cities can flounder on that and get behind, and kind of makes them a little less livable, a little less approachable. It's a place that you might not want to invest your future in, have a family and start a business. So having this now, as soon as we can, is really helpful to that fact.
You mentioned one other thing. You said something about AARP has 8 demands as far as,
Yes,
what were their demands?
sure. There were 8 domains.
Yeah,
Right.
so I don't know if you guys remember, probably a year ago now, maybe a little bit more than that, we got presented with an award for AARP, making us one of the most livable communities. I think we're actually only one of 2 in Brevard County. Satellite Beach is the other one. But they have 8 pillars that are very similarly aligned with ours. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but one of them is equity and social outreach and stuff like that. They look at things like housing, public housing for individuals or aging individuals, and they get sometimes into the nitty-gritty of the policy. But we're in line with that, and we use this document actually in its first draft to submit to get that award. So they had seen a very early iteration of this, and I actually just got an email from them yesterday asking us where we were, and I let them know we were presenting to you. But being part of that, there's some steps involved. It goes through a period, a cycle where we show that we're making steps toward it. And in the action plan, it gets us there. So we'll be doing 2 things at the same time.
Those 8 domains too are listed in the action plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
May I speak, Mayor? Thank you very much. I think the staff has done an excellent job on this. Congratulations. And I know this is a lot of work, a lot of detail. I find it very readable and comprehensive. I especially like that it's based on science. And I think that it's very, very well done. And I think any resident can read it and get involved in it and give feedback. I think that it's that easy to read and organized. Thank you so much for doing this. I don't have any questions at this time. I'm sure I will later. And that's all I need to say. Thank you.
I think this is amazing, the document. You guys did a really good job. I have one question, and I don't know. We talk about our aging population and a lot of handicapped people. Is there any plan in this to have some kind of, if we have a bad storm down the road, a shelter of some kind for the older handicapped people? I mean, most of the time they want you to get off the island, but for the older generation, which is getting older and handicapped, are we going to have anywhere that they would be able to shelter, on the beach here and be safe?
So the document takes several approaches to that, and through its various targets, highlights areas where we can, as a staff, develop our own internal infrastructure that can provide the types of services you're talking about to individuals that can't get them after a post-disaster situation. And, there's early developments to trying to develop some type of resilience hub. The resilience hub is basically some type of city facility that can act, basically as the name suggests, as a hub of activity after a disaster situation that can service a community that can't otherwise service itself. That operates normally, as some type of community center or a public building, and afterwards through the use of renewable energy, which is a target plan, through the use of backup generators, which is in the plan. There's a continuity of operations that the staff afterwards could get back onto the island, send out a message and say, hey, we're pre-known that it'll be here. We have communications, we have fresh water, we have air conditioning, internet. So yes, I think there is language in here that can point to that in the form of a resilience hub. And there are city facilities that could probably certainly qualify for that with a few modifications.
And that hub would be ADA compliant as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the key also is post-disaster. I'm not sure we would advise that we, not evacuate people during a storm, but I think if you think of it in terms of post-disaster, that's one of our goals, is to be able to facilitate needs for the community.
Yeah, we did, people need to evacuate when they have to, but, if people are stuck in their house and not being able to get out.
Right. And we
But
do
maybe-
a lot of work when we are doing hurricane preparedness. Zach does a lot of it, a lot of the heavy lifting along with Stephanie and Molly, making sure that people have the right resources and numbers if they need transportation off the island.
Oh,
There are things that we are already doing
right.
that
Okay.
services that the county provides. We have Nixle, which is an emergency management alert system. So there are things we're doing to facilitate getting people safely off if they need to.
Well, I just thought of that while I was reading through, but everything is really, I'm excited about it and glad that we're moving this way. And we're, doing all the right stuff. And thank you for all your hard work.
So Brenda, post hurricane, so the facility like we're getting ready to build, would it be able to be utilized for something like the multi-generational?
That would be our goal. Yes.
That was going to be my comment also.
Yes.
Multi-generational facility will definitely be a place where community might be able to get together
Right.
after a major storm.
That
Right.
is
And
one of the criteria.
right.
for-
And I'll say that this is not necessarily unique to us, but there are organizations, there's an organization called the Sustainability Directors Network, and that's one of the things they talk about, is having somewhere for people to go after and get, credible information if they need water, resources, whatever, charge your phone. That is our goal, is to make that facility serve as that as well.
Councilmember Kellum's point, there is always the unfortunate few that choose to not
Right.
evacuate or can't evacuate.
Mhm.
So we as a city having the infrastructure in place that can withstand a storm system, some type of flooding event that's prolonged, maybe the community doesn't have power, but our facilities do, because we've taken the steps to harden them with backup generators, battery systems, solar panels. that's the way to go. I mean,
Right.
we can be that crutch for them. if
That's
They need
good.
help.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead. Yep.
Yes.
Great. All I have to say is, wow, I'm very, very impressed. This is so awesome. There's so much, reading through it, listening to the presentation. There were so many things that got me excited. And I know that, this took some time to put together, but it was definitely worth waiting for. So hats off to city manager and the entire staff of everyone who worked hard to put this together. I look forward to working with council. It sounds like we're all excited about implementing these things. And I think, when we talk about resiliency, being able to overcome difficult situations, continuity, whether it's your business, whether it's your home, just being able to keep up and running, for a lack of better words. And this is something Zach and I have talked about. There's the environmental benefits, but what I think I'm most excited about is just the economic benefits. And I heard the word and read the word investment a lot throughout here. And that's what this is, something that we are going to see a return tenfold on many of these things. As a renewable energy professional myself, we've seen, there's so much bad information out there about some of these things in here, whether it's solar and you're going to force us to go, alternative fuels or, electric fleets, whatever we choose to do. But the truth is it's more cost effective than it's ever been. And I think that the city has done an excellent job in organizing this and putting it together. I certainly have some comments, but I will follow the process. I look forward to the retreat and figuring out how we're going to get the public involved. But I think just my one comment on that is a combination of things to kind of meet the different types of needs within the community. Online, I think, is definitely a no-brainer. And then, if we can offer some outreach, like you said, Zach, that's always helpful as well for folks to be able to come. But this is something that I think we've all been looking forward to. I don't know how many times we heard, oh, that's going to be in the resiliency plan. It's coming. Well, it's here. And I am, I guess my brain is going towards, how we're going to rank some of these initiatives. Obviously, you can do the right thing at the wrong time, and there's an order of operation, and I know that staff will be burdened with that. And so I think that being able to do it in a logical order, because can't do it all at once. This is a 30-year initiative, but I do think we've got some really good things in here that is going to help Cape Canaveral step out front and just provide a better quality of life for our community. So thank you all very much. Really, really impressed with the work you did here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Zach, during this period of time between now and February the 26th, are you going to be doing any public sessions for public input, or how are you going to?
No. First, we wanted to get your comments first to see if you had any feedback or edits that you would like put in there. And then we figured that once those were implemented and we saw it or we showed it to everyone at the retreat again, we can move forward with public comment periods. So that way it's polished, it's ready to go. So basically they're seeing a finished document. Does that sound right, John?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. By the way, Zach, Brenda, Tracy, everybody, fantastic work on this. Thank you. And council, thank you for having this meeting. The process, as Zach says, is correct. And with Dave, the four of us, we brainstormed about how to roll out this monster. It's a huge document, and it carries so much weight with it. And we agreed it was worthy of the strategic planning retreat, but it's too much for just that one day. So you all agreed to have this meeting, this workshop today for the introductory purposes. thank you for that. That helps to roll it out. So to recap, the way we see this going forward, this was the first initial rollout. There's probably a few questions. Of course, we're here to answer any questions you might have, but you haven't all absorbed it yet. And as you absorb it, as you review it, as you get those comments back to us, we know there will be a lot more feedback, questions, and answers through that period. That feedback is so valuable to us because we know that the council now has weighed in. They like what we've done. They like where we are. This is the way staff looks at it. We now have council buy-in. We go boldly forward with that into public workshops after the strategic planning retreat. We'll review it all at the planning retreat. Public workshops as council desires from there. But we do have a tentative date of June 1st, is it?
Sometime in June, yeah.
Yeah, we want to get this adopted because what we're doing is we're creating a rule book or a Bible of sorts, much like we did with the visioning, where these are all our aspirations and our goals. And the week to week, the month to month that we do as staff and as a council, we want to make sure we're hitting that as we go. We'll use this as a reason to move forward with initiatives. It helps council, it helps staff, it helps our community, much like we've done it with the visioning. So that's our path forward, Mayor.
That's what I was wondering for. We're going to be having our retreat in March, but we should be through with this. The council should have this wrapped up by the 26th. And then the March should be the retreat where we can go through it all.
Yes, sir.
And then it will be presented to the public and adopted by June. Where does the public come in on the input with?
So during the workshops or public comment period or whatever, they can provide their feedback.
After the retreat? You're talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly, sir.
With it. Very good. Now we'll let the compliment stuff for the hard work. I know a lot of work.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Anybody would like to speak before we go to the webinar on this? Okay. Daniel, do you have any public comments?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay, bring it back. Nobody want to talk? We'll bring it back to the dais, and I guess we'll have to adjourn. Next item.
Mayor, I just wanted to add that I enjoyed speaking with Platt Loftus recently from our Waste Pro. We spoke specifically about this plan, and he and I are very excited about how we can roll forward together, even with our partnership contract with Waste Pro on this. So this touches so many things that we never really saw that coming out of it. But when Platt and I talked, we realized this dovetails with this. And we'll be seeing some improvements even in our working with Waste Pro and in our community because of this.
All right, staff, we want to mention anything, Mike? You have something to say?
When you're talking about Waste Pro, and they've done such a good job with the city. I mean, I don't know, when is their contract?
I don't have that right in front of me. Platt, do you have that? Yeah, if you would, please.
Good evening, Platt Loftus, Waste Pro, Florida. Yeah, I just happened to have a meeting with Mr. Morley yesterday, and this whole agenda came up, and we're absolutely excited about this. I've spoken to a few people at corporate and my boss actually, and there are some action items that I'll give Zachary about, and we look forward to moving forward with some of these items. There's 3 items that I'll talk about later, but action item number 7, that's pretty much our bailiwick. And I'll come back to more detail in regards to action item number 7, but we're on board. We'd love to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Platt. Anything else?
No, sir. I just want to thank the council for attending tonight, holding this meeting, and the public who came out. Thank you all very much.
Adjourned.
Bye.